repairing and restoring the screen-used mermaid tail from the movie Hook. As someone who has been obsessed with mermaids for literally their entire life, this was a really big deal to be able to see such an iconic tail in person. I do offer professional tail repairs, so being able to restore this tail was just such an amazing opportunity. I started by unwrapping it very, very carefully. This tail is made out of urethane, which does have a shelf life of about 15 years. And at 31 years old, this tail is starting to fall apart. So it was stuck and melted to the bubble wrap. So I used ice to get it unstuck without damaging it. I really want to preserve as much of the original tail as I possibly can throughout the restoration process. The first step is to assess the damage and document all of the damage. So there were a few rips, and there were places where the tail was kind of starting to tear under its own weight. There were places where the scale texture had kind of melted off. The worst damage was the side here, where there was a big chunk of the tail that was just gone. Also, there was like a clump of fur stuck in the side. I'm trying to not only repair this tail, but make it stronger so it will last a long time. This was the first time I had ever worked on a tail made out of urethane instead of silicone or latex. I did lots of testing before I put it on the actual tail, because I was obviously super nervous to start working on this. I started with the simplest of the repairs, which is the small tear at the end of the fluke. The texture of urethane, it's really weird. It gets hot and sticky just so quick. But obviously I got the hang of it, and I worked on the tail slowly but surely, just a little bit at a time. I had this repair done. I cleaned the tail and I made some very small molds of the scale texture so that I was able to make little patches of urethane scales to fill in some of the spots where the scales were missing because of the melting. So I had little patches of urethane scales to kind of restore that texture back to what it was supposed to look like. Matching the color, that one was difficult because this tail is known as the pink tail in the movie. So it started out kind of like a neon pinkish red, and over time has faded and is now like a giant cooked carrot is the best way to describe what the color is in person. So for the places where I'm replicating texture and adding scales on, I just used a base orange to start out. And I did this in layers, many layers of urethane. So here's that repair once it's done and painted. Here's the fin. The pins are marking the spots that I have not completed yet and need to go back and add more urethane to. Once I had completed most of the front, I went and then I started working on this part that is the worst damage of all of it. And this giant clump of like cat hair, I did have to cut that out of the tail. And I did have to cut off some of the really melted part, but then I was able to go in and add more urethane patches to restore the scales. After I got all the layers on there and then I did all of the painting layers, it looked really good. Obviously, it still wasn't done at this point, but I mean, the hole's gone, so that's an improvement. I did find that working with the urethane, I could match the color, but the urethane did make it shiny, so the places that are repaired are a little bit more visible than I would like them to be. But over time, the new urethane is just going to make it so much stronger. It's going to make it last longer. I also really wanted to keep the feel of the original. The way it feels is unique. It's not like a silicone tail or latex tail. It's different. And I wanted it to feel the same as the original after it had been repaired. I didn't want some spots to feel different. So that's why I did repair it with the urethane, even though you can see kind of the shininess of the new compared to the old. I think it keeps the integrity of the original tail a lot better than it would have if I had used a different material for the repairs. Now, watching the movie, I originally thought the feet would end where the fins are, but the feet actually went all the way into the fluke, and they were pointed like ballerina feet. That big tear on the side of the tail is from pressure. The tail is very heavy, and it was kind of collapsing under its own weight. So to reduce this pressure and prevent the tail from ripping again or more, I filled it with bubble wrap, and then I sealed it all the way up to where the fins are. The tail was originally cut down the back so the actress could get into it, because all three tails came out of the same mold, the mold for the blue tail. So this tail was actually made to fit the actress who played the blue mermaid. So to get her in it properly, they did have to carve out some of the inside and cut the tail all the way down. The zip ties are obviously not permanent. They're just to hold it all closed while the glue dries. Then I moved on to the back, and kind of blending in the patches that I had added to the side. And the back here, you can see where it's been cut so the actress can get into the tail. You can see where it's been carved out where the knees go. And I think that's really cool and we should keep that, so I left it. It was clear to me I wasn't going to be able to restore all of the original texture to the back just because of how melted and degraded the urethane was. So I added like 5 layers of urethane to fill in all of the holes. I very carefully painted this by hand. When I say by hand, I mean with my fingers. The brush just didn't get the effect I was looking for. So once it looked the way I wanted it to, I went over it with another layer of urethane. The urethane does have a bit of an orange tint, so I wanted to make sure the color was perfect even after this orange tint was put on top, and I think I nailed it. Then I moved on to the sides and the back, making sure that I covered everything. Right here you can see where some of the back of the fluke was perfectly fine and the rest of it was damaged. I'm not sure why. I think it's just the way it was stored. A lot of people ask me if this was my tail. It is not. It belongs to a collector who hired me to do the restoration and the repairs. It has already been shipped back to its home. I am very grateful to have had the opportunity to work on this tail and restore it back to a display quality and preserve this original piece of art that is such an iconic tail. I have also been asked if I am going to be making replicas to sell. The answer for that is no. I am not going to be replicating someone else's handmade art. That just isn't right. But I am looking to add a hook-inspired fluke to my fluke options for custom tails in the near future. I originally made this as a patch to cover the melted parts of the fluke and restore that texture, but decided that I really wanted to preserve as much of the original tail as I could, and I didn't want to cover it up. So I just kept this for myself as a reminder of that time I was working on the tail from Hook. And it's on my wall, and I really love how this tail turned out. Some other questions I got are weight and price. So I have no idea what the tail sold for at auction, but I do know that my estimate was like 60 pounds and the tail only weighs 33. If you liked seeing this process, please make sure you subscribe, like the video, comment below. How do you think this tail turned out? So before and after here, the goal is not to completely make that line invisible because we want people to see where it was cut to get the actor inside. The goal was really to make it stronger for the future. Looking at the back of this tail, it was very degraded, and I'm very glad I was able to preserve the original look. Again, making it stronger and fixing those melted spots. These are pretty good before and afters. That giant hole in cat hair is gone. The little ripped hair there at the bottom of the fluke is invisible. In the movie, you cannot tell that these little tiny fins on the side have all these hand-sculpted scales on them, but to be able to bring that back is really cool. Now that I've done all the repairs and the restoration, this tail is going to be so much stronger. I really hope this tail lasts a really long time.